bonjour messieurs. Merci de prendre place, d'être avec nous ce matin aux rencontres économiques d'Aix. Vous voyez, je suis bien accompagnée pour un thème qui est important dans la vie des Français, dont on parle un peu moins dans cette période pourtant inédite, mais qui concerne énormément de gens, qui est souvent un objectif affiché de tous les gouvernements qui passent, c'est l'emploi et notamment le plein emploi. Alors pour en parler ce matin à mes côtés, j'ai Stéphane Carcillo du Cercle des économistes, la puissance invitante. Donc Stéphane Carcillo qui est un spécialiste de ces questions d'emploi, d'accompagnement. Ensuite, j'ai monsieur Reda Mahfoud, directeur général de Malte France. Alors Malte France, vous nous en direz un petit peu plus, mais c'est le leader européen du freelance. À ses côtés, j'ai Madame Inès Sediki, présidente de l'association GetUp, qui travaille notamment auprès des jeunes. Elle nous dira tout ce qu'elle fait, tout ce que cette association, la façon dont elle œuvre. À ses côtés, Denis Gravouille.
Stanley Savouy, you're the Federal Secretary in charge of Social Protection. Mr. Employment of CGT Trade Union, to keep it simple. Alain Roumiac, Director of Manpower Group of France. For Southern Europe, Manpower is a group we know well. It's a temporary work group, and right next to me we have Olivier Nella, President of Fournis Mazars France. This is a management consultancy firm. Thank you for being here, and please take your seats. We'd like to say hi to everybody who is listening to us and watching us remotely. It's quite a huge theme, full employment. It's an objective in itself. But perhaps we should have a little definition, first of all, to determine what full employment is. What does this mean in France and elsewhere? And to do that, Stéphane Carcillo is going to give us an idea of the situation. And yes, of course, a quick definition and some feedback to tell you where we are at the moment. So full employment, there's no real, very clear definition that is accepted by everybody, but we believe that between 3 and 5% unemployment rate is considered to be full employment. In France, we're at 7.4%, so we're not really yet at the level of full employment. Most of the other European countries are at 5% or a little bit below. The OECD employment rate is 4.9% on average. So there's not really unemployment. There is full employment almost everywhere except in a few European countries, those southern European countries, where full employment isn't yet a reality. Countries like Italy, although it's getting close in Italy, Greece and Spain. In Spain, the unemployment rate remains quite high, and to a lesser extent, France. So to get to 5% unemployment rate, need to have 1 million additional jobs in concrete terms in France. But some people believe that full employment is more a question of the rate of occupation. In other words, you reach a certain proportion of people in the working population are in employment. In France, this rate is 2/3. In Germany, it's 77%. That in France, that would represent an effort of 4,000 extra jobs. So 4 million extra jobs rather. So there's a big difference between those two figures. Since COVID, France has created 2.4 million jobs. So it is achievable. It can be done. Do we need full employment? Yes, we do need full employment for financial reasons and also for the future. If we create 4 million jobs, we will bring in 100 billion euros of revenue into the public coffers. So you can imagine the difference that would make for health, for the seniors, for investment in adaptation to climate change, all kinds of things. Education, of course, very important as well, and research and development questions that it will be very important for the future, where there is a great need for investment. So full employment is, of course, has to do with social cohesion and inclusion. And also, it's very much connected with the future. It's very important to be able to finance our future investments. As I said, the situation overall has improved in France. At 7.5% of unemployment, you might think we're at the right at the floor in France, whereas in other countries it's 3.5%, so they're doing much better. A few years ago, we were at 9 or 10% unemployment in France. So we have made some progress. We're getting closer to this level of full employment, thanks to a number of reforms that were carried out over the last 15 years. Regardless of the governments, a series of reforms have been put in place. First of all, reducing the cost of labor for low wages. Previously, the labor cost for low wages was very high. This is a coherent strategy for many years. Other reforms that have reinforced the incentives to keep your job or to return to work. I'm thinking of the reforms of retirement pensions and of unemployment allowances. Over the last 15 years, these reforms have really been the main factor in increasing the level of employment of seniors. So this tends to increase the age of retirement. And in addition, you have to have it's important to say that you need to have additional strategies to keep this full employment rate. So let's look at some questions. What should be the most important subject to go further and to get to this level of full employment, either in terms of rate of employment or unemployment rate? I think that now we need to turn towards what we call the non-pecuniary barriers to employment. Why is it that some people look for a job and don't find a job? Is it a problem of providing the right kind of support for job seekers? Maybe France Travail, the employment office previously called France Emploi, maybe they need to change their strategy. There's also a question of mobility of people. There's also a question of integration and inclusion of people who are very far removed from the labour market. There's also the question of the quality of the jobs that people find, because this is important for a number of people. It's very difficult to stay in their job because of the quality of the job and the working conditions. Here I'm thinking of the importance of training to be able to change your career. What more can we do in terms of training? A lot of reforms have been in place over the last few years where we transformed education and training quite successfully. What else can we do? I'm thinking, of course, of education. We have too many young people leaving the education system without any diplomas or qualification, about 100,000 per year. What else can we do? What can we do, bearing in mind that people don't have the right skills, and in that case it's very difficult to find the right job, and it's difficult for employers to find the employees, so it hinders the creation of jobs. What can we do in terms of investment in SMEs and very small enterprises? We have a deficit of employment in these and very small and medium-sized enterprises. One of the central components of employment is the salary, and salary depends on productivity. You can't have a high wage when you have companies that are not producing a very high level of productivity. What can we do also to promote the growth of startups, recent companies? Virtually half of the net growth in employment every year is produced by young companies, recent companies. So we need to create the right conditions for them to be able to grow quickly. That can boost the creation of jobs and get us closer to full employment. So those are the possibilities we could discuss. Since we only have a limited amount of time, I don't think we'll be able to answer all of those questions, but nevertheless, we will try. Who would like to start? Alain Roumiac, perhaps, from Manpower. What do you think? Are we making progress in getting closer to full employment? What are your observations? In fact, you are the intermediary between the employers who, we haven't said this, but obviously they complain they are unable to find employees. They talk about a shortage of manpower, and there's also, you have employees who can't, or job seekers who can't find the job they're looking for. What are your observations? Hello, everybody. First of all, concerning my specific territory, I have countries which are in more than full employment. 2% unemployment rate in the Czech Republic, 2% in Switzerland. So you're saying it's possible? Yes. There are countries that do it, yes. Another subject you haven't mentioned is that also often these countries have a very strong industrial base. To be able to achieve full employment, industry and re-industrialization is a very important subject. You initially mentioned 2 points. Historically, since the last 65 years, our profession, above all, has been aiming to help people who find it difficult to integrate into the labor market. Our aim is to help them do that through temporary work and temping, to be able to acquire skills, to be able to get training, and then to be able to get a full-time, long-time job, to be able to get them onto the system of training and education. Of course, the issue of skills is very important, and you have to make this a good match between what companies need and what the employees have to offer. So every year we train more than 40,000 people in France, so that either they have their 2 days that they need to get a qualification to be able to work, or we also help them with alternation between studying and working, sandwich courses. They've also mentioned a number of barriers that need to be removed for some number of people. My personal conviction is that the most important subject to be able to achieve full employment, or at least to be able to have a good match between the demands of the businesses and to be able for them to be able to fill their vacancies and for them to be able to reduce the unemployment rate and to find job seekers who will fill these positions. The most important thing is to work more on support, on accompanying people into the labour market. The problem is that in this country we have put the emphasis, I feel like there's been an arbitration. We put more money in compensation rather than into support. This is different from countries in Northern Europe. I'm not saying necessarily we'd have less compensation, less unemployment benefit, but I think we need to put more money into support for people to help them into a job. We are working with France Travail, the unemployment office in France, and they're helping us to provide this better support, including people who have been unemployed for many, many years. But in concrete terms, what are the barriers? The worst barriers to preventing full employment? Is it a problem of training? It is training, but not only that. If I'm looking at the work we do with France Travail, people say, I can't work because I have health problems. If you look at France Travail and Pôle Emploi, those people won't be able to help them with that. So if you combine expertise on the labour market with support from medical professions, then you will be able to help the person define in what kind of environment they will be able to find a job. And our experience shows us that over a period of 6 or 8 months, we're able to get 50% of those people into a job. So this demonstrates that if you don't support people and they help them, they will not have the means to be able to find a job in the labour market. So this subject of support is absolutely vital. I'm personally convinced of this. We have 300,000 people find a job every year. We accompany 500,000 through these different programs to get to this level of full employment. Of course, you have to have a flourishing economy. If the economy isn't generating any jobs, you can't reduce unemployment. But the most important point is to provide better support for job seekers so that they have more confidence and that they can find a path to employment. So we have the Gavry, the Secretary General in charge of social protection at the CGT trade union. Do you agree with this? That it's important to give better support to job seekers? I'd like to react to 3 points. First of all, I don't agree with the definition of full employment as it has been described, because that's the first point. The second point is that we need to look at the reforms, which I think are pretty disastrous in terms of the retirement pensions and unemployment benefit. And then thirdly, we need to look at how we can find a policy to increase employment in France in general. First of all, we can't say that full employment is 5%. If you don't look in addition at the quality of the employment. If you look at the France Travail statistics, we have 6,200,000 people who are registered, and we need to look at the people who at a particular time are not employed at any particular time, whereas in reality, job seekers spend their time working and working in short-term missions from one to the other successively. If you look at what happened during COVID in March 2020, when everybody had to stop working, or virtually everybody, most of the employees with long-term contracts had a partial, were working part-time. Others with short-term contracts didn't have a contract, and other people who were unemployed at the time meant that you have an unemployment rate of more than 5 million people. So you look at the unemployment rate as defined by the International Labour Office, which was defined in the 1960s, when you are either in a long-term contract or looking for employment. This is an inaccurate description. You're forgetting several million temporary workers. So apart from the controversy about how you define this, these are individual situations. I think we agree, everybody, that in France, even though the unemployment rate has gone down, we still have a lot of people who would like to work and who are unable to find a job. So what can we do? Let me just finish what I was saying about that point. I don't think that we can say that we have millions of people who remain in a precarious situation. On average, for a young person, for them to find their first long-term contract takes 9 years. That's the social situation we're in at the moment. We have millions of people in that situation. So full employment for us will never be just the employment rate. Where I agree with Stefan Castillo is that we have to look at the reality of employment for people who are at the working age. The indicators from the ILO are completely inaccurate. So the ILO says that if you work for 1 hour, you're no longer unemployed, according to their definition, which is inaccurate. Then, of course, there have been these reforms. I don't agree with the pension reforms that were put in place, and that means some people have been able to push back their retirement and have been able to continue working in the job they have. But the truth is, half of people aged 60 don't have a job. 28% of people aged 60 don't have a job. I have other figures which tell me that it's more like 50% of people who are aged 60 don't have a job. Depends whether you're looking at the working population or people who are 60 years old. The question is, how do we avoid having these poverty traps with the combination of the reforms of unemployment benefit and retirement pension? It's hundreds of people who are not in a job and don't have an employment benefit and are a long way from being able to get the retirement pension. We haven't created jobs by changing the retirement pension age. We have reduced the expenditure linked to retirement, whereas in our opinion that should be increased. We haven't created jobs with the pension reform or the reform of the employment benefit. So how can we do this? Well, our proposal is that we don't want to have a delocalization of industry. So you agree with Alain Vromiak that we don't want to have deindustrialization? Yes, absolutely. We know we have a major challenge, which is the environmental transition, and so we have to organize ourselves to make sure that we have reindustrialization, which is based on this ecological transition. We can't accept that all of the foundries that we're making parts for diesel cars have to close down. No, they have to be converted into factories that will make parts for electric vehicles. At the same time, France is opening up new sectors for electric vehicles. Yes, that's true. But for example, in Aveyron, in Brittany and Poitou, a lot of factories have been closed, and these territories have been deserted because of land use planning decisions. So the first point is reindustrialization, yes. So for example, if you want some precise examples, in Gardanne, we have the coal plants have closed down. That's a good idea. We need to close down the coal-powered power plants. And for several years now, we've been fighting to have a transition to convert these factories. When you say support, you meaning supporting reconversions? So that when you close a factory that is based on coal, you have to change from a policy where you stop closing factories, saying the only solution is to go to a low-cost country where you can pollute because the environmental standards are lower. You have to transform and convert these factories and support the employees who can change their jobs. That's why we want to have a flexible unemployment support, so that when people are unemployed, they're not in a precarious situation. Because at the moment, 2/3 of people unemployed don't have any support of this kind. What we want to have is have a flexible system that makes it possible to support people, so that although they're unemployed, they still have an employment contract. So we have a major challenge, which is to match the level of qualification, whether it's the original level of qualification or whether it's been acquired through vocational training. So it's a long-term investment. However, I don't believe that we should lower the level of compensation. The level of compensation is already quite low, because we know that people get training when they're in a secure position. People aren't going to go and get training when they just need to survive. They can't afford to do that. However, when they know they have some security, although they're unemployed, then they will go for some training. Thank you very much. I'll turn now to Regan Lafloud. Regan Lafloud, the Director General of Malt in France. So this is a different kind of job. We're talking about salary jobs, but you are supporting and developing another type of work. Yes, I'll just tell you about the world of intellectual service provision. This is what we work on at Malt, and this is what we're promoting through freelancing. There are two things I'd really like to react to. The first thing is very important in a broader sense. Talking about our relationship with work, we have to realize that the expectations that employees have about their work is completely different from the average employee had in the 1970s or 1980s. It has changed in several respects. First of all, people now work because they are able to, they are happy in their work, and they want to find a good balance between their private life and the professional life. Since COVID, this trend has accelerated. So this search for value of their work is much greater than what you might have seen 30 or 40 years ago. And it's very important from a completely political point of view. And in the positioning of companies in relation to their employees, they have to take account of this. Yes, so you're saying they need to take that into account more? Yes, absolutely. So through our freelancing platform, we respond to that need almost by construction, because freelancing is a choice where people are independent. They're able to choose their employee, or the person who's going to benefit from their service. They're going to choose their... Is it always a choice? In the world of intellectual service provision, it is, yes. When you talk to independent workers, we have 600,000 on a platform, and most of them say that they don't want to go back to being an employee. In the world of intellectual services, is not the same for all kinds of temporary, not the same for temporary work, for temping. So for companies, and for, in a broader sense, also for the political world, we have to understand that today we have a legal framework that is rather obsolete, where people work 5 days a week, where people in some cases have to work at a particular time of day, which often doesn't correspond to their needs. So if we look again at the world of employment, why is it that people are able to find jobs? You have to look at their original motivation and their aspirations, and you have to have a multifaceted approach to the world of work. The second point is the world of seniors. This is fundamental. You may have seen that the age pyramid, that increasingly we're going to need to get these seniors to be able to work. And mathematically, it costs more money to employ a senior than to employ a young person. We are convinced that the public policies have not yet provided enough support and promotion for the employment of seniors. The world of independent workers is a lever, because we can have a softer conversion or transformation. Somebody who is already at a retirement age can continue working. And this is fundamental in the transfer of skills. You have people who are 20 or 30 years of experience and want to transfer their skills and expertise to somebody else. The present framework doesn't make that possible. So the present scope of flexibilization, what you're saying is it's a very important cultural change that is happening in the world of work. The way people look at the world of work, whether it's chosen or it's forced on people, people no longer want to work as people worked before. And you're saying that the legal framework today the judicial framework and the framework defined by public policies is no longer appropriate, is no longer fit for purpose and needs to be adapted. Yes, absolutely. And a final figure, the unemployment rate, as Stefan said, has been going down over the last 10 years. Over the last 10 years, the number of employees has also gone down from 92% to 85%. So we have to look at that change. Sometimes it's seen from afar and it's difficult to interpret. And this is because people are looking to be more and more independent and want to have a better balance between their private life and working life. Concerning this cultural aspect, let me, Ines Siddiqui, we've been talking about seniors. You work with the other end of the spectrum in terms of employment, which is young people. You tend to work with young people more. What do you observe? What are the difficulties, bearing in mind that you're working in an area, I'll hand over to the microphone, you're working in a territory which is Saint-Saint-Denis in the suburbs of Paris. Yes, hello, yes, absolutely. I run a association called Get Up over the last 7 years, which works in Saint-Saint-Denis in the Paris suburbs. We have two areas of work. First of all, to support young people to help them find their place in society through training and education, and also to help them to take their full place as a citizen. These people aren't just statistics, they're also people who have a lot to contribute to society. And through the work of training the narrative about these urban areas and these young people by producing content, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So we support young people from the middle school to high school, and when we provide them with support during schools, and then we provide them with the training courses and internships, and throughout this stage of life until they're able to find a job, and then after that also, because then other issues with career progress in the companies for them to understand the codes. What are the aspirations of young people? First of all, to answer your question, how do we achieve full employment? Because this resonates very much with the issues of young people today. For me, the best way to achieve full employment is to give back greater value to work and people who work. For example, if you want to have full employment, there are jobs where there's not enough workforce, that people are not enough people able to do these jobs. In these jobs include nurses, personal services, to also construction, teaching also. Why is that? Whereas during the COVID period, we giving them rounds of applause all the time. These jobs because these jobs are very precarious, difficult. The working hours are very fractioned, and so this is why when I'm talking about recognition of work and of workers, we have to give them greater value. Apart from remuneration, there's also that comes up with that. And the second thing that's very important, we're looking at the top 10 of underemployment, because full employment also takes account of underemployment, people who are not working full-time, people who only work in the morning and then work in the evening again, who have a working day that is split up, and people can't be with their children when they want to be. When you're working as a freelance in an intellectual profession, that's one thing. Normally you have security, you have a flat, you have some housing. When you're freelancing in the delivery business, you can't build anything. It's impossible to build up your life. That's the reason why we have a lot of people from the working class districts, and they tend to work in this kind of job. Just give you a figure, 1 worker out of 5 today lives in a working class district. 1 person who 1 out of every 4 people who work in delivery services live in a working class district. So they are much more represented in these professions than they should be. We've been working for 2 years on the question of commitment of young people in these areas and their prospects in France. Recently, we launched an Ipsos survey to give some figures. I'd like to share these with you now. The main concern of young people in these districts is precarity. It's work. The second is the future of the social system and the future of the health system, because they've seen their parents working in construction and service industries. They've seen that their parents didn't have access to a good retirement pension. A lot of people also do these difficult jobs, and so they're not able to work until retirement age because they're in poor health. That's another problem. So talking about the difficulty and of these kinds of jobs. Yes, the difficulty of these kinds of work, the physical difficulty of doing this work, lack of stable jobs and the difficulty to be able to have build a family life. The second statistic is when you ask young people from these districts how they define themselves. I'm talking about young people from these working class districts, but also it applies to a lot of people generally, and a lot of French people. When we ask them what defines you the most, they talk about their education and their work that defines them the most, before their family or cultural heritage and before any other things. So the working class districts, what people want is to be able to find a place in society. So it's a pillar of social cohesion. Yes, absolutely. Our work today is the foundation for the nation, as the gentleman said earlier. This is where people come together. There's a social cohesion. And that's where people can find their place in society. That's why we need to envisage these public policies within the company and to corroborate this. It's really a question of recognition and people to find their place in society. One person out of every two in these working class districts who are not considered in their true value in French society.
And they're totally denigrated in the media. So it's a question of finding one's place and to feel useful and to be able to contribute. And that's the reason for me, the message I want to pass on is to think of the jobs as a cohesion tool, as a recognition of the contribution of people to society. I still don't understand at this stage why after COVID and all these essential workers, the importance of school, why these jobs are not revalued, whether through wages and through society, through the exposure they have and the consideration they may get for their activity. That's what's the challenge today, full employment and the will to work of people. I draw a bridge, span a bridge with the president of Forvis Mazars France, audit cabinet consultant, as a globalized company. Even though you're at the head of the French subsidiary, you intervene over certain initiatives. I'm thinking of, I think you are a major player, you accompany non-profits, associations, and initiatives like Nos quartiers ont du talent, our districts, our neighborhoods have talent. So Forvis Mazars is a service company. We perform audits, provide consultancy. We have two specificities. The first is that we recruit young people with major university degrees. Our age average is 29 years old, so we don't really represent society, and our people are not really indicative of the debate we're having. But there's a strong correlation between full employment and the value, the meaning we give to work, how we accompany the active population. We talked about public policies which are evolving, sometimes with success, sometimes without, the questioning. I think that with a view to this topic on how we care for the active population, we have a responsibility of having collaborators that are in good health. There is no sustainable full employment if we don't have collaborators that are in good health. What this means is that they feel comfortable, they see meaning in their work, they have faith in their future, in their professional future. And so we do support certain associations. I'll share our experience with you, but not necessarily transposable, but I think it sheds an interesting light for all of us. To have collaborators in good health, I think, well, you have to train them, first of all. We adapt to their demand for flexibility. The younger generations have a lot of expectations, and not the same as those as we were 30 years ago when I started working at Mazars. And third, we give them the possibility to commit themselves, so to train them. You understand what it means? We are, how can I say, we fuel the French society with these future managers, because people don't join us to develop, to have a career or to become associates, in our business. I've been working in this company for 33 years. There's a big turnover, 5,000 people today. We hire 1,500 people, recruit 1,500 people per year in France, and the equivalent and the world over. More than 100 countries we have in our industry, a little more than 20% of turnover, which is slowing down today due to the context. And our promise is employability. We don't try to retain our staff members. What we want is to develop the employability of our collaborators, enable them to take responsibilities, irrigate French society. We are working in two major sectors that involve all our enterprises: data and artificial intelligence on the one hand, and sustainability on the other. And we took the initiative of, we used to say Mazars, but since the 1st of June we say Forbis Mazars. So we created a data school to give our collaborators the skills and competencies that will enable them to be flexible in a world that will evolve with AI. Same thing with sustainability. We took an initiative to develop, it's a word from my colleague, bilingualism, so that our collaborators can speak finance and they speak sustainability, and not only finance, technology, information system, and sustainability. The second topic on how we can adapt and respond to their expectations in terms of flexibility. Since the COVID, we talked a lot about work, but beyond that, I'll take 2 or 3 examples to respond to these demands from this young generation, average age 28, who see the world evolving, who have other envies, other wishes. We took the decision to suppress the exclusivity clause item in our contracts, to seek the proper balance between their commitment with us and their personal envies, give time to other people, or develop a personal project in parallel. No exclusivity clause. Secondly, we allow some people who decide to leave us to join companies like Malt, with which we work, and we find them as freelancers, and we're happy to have them because they participate in our competency hub. We enable them to commit themselves. We accompany them, we give them our time to help associations, to support associations. You mentioned our Neighborhoods Have Talent, which is a well-known national organization. We have another one that's smaller, which looks like your association, Mrs. Seliki, which started from Chambéry, developing a national project. It is also in Saint-Denis, and also in Britain. Do you think that there are more initiatives today that companies like yours that are doing well? You're the startup nation in a way. These companies, are they concerned with initiatives, as you mentioned, and there's a will from your staff members to commit themselves? Well, there's a lot of envy, a lot of hopes, a lot of expectations from our collaborators, and a lot of companies. Forbis Mazars is not an exception to the rule. Like yesterday, I was sitting around a table, we talked about mixity with young people from the Rencontre Économique d'Aix. We talked about mixity, the CSR commitment of companies. You say that these companies are doing well. It's true for Manpower, it's true for Malt. They act. They're active. I ask you the question because we see where we are today. It's a very particular moment. And the discussion in these rencontres is to bring worlds together. So do these worlds, are you under the impression that they manage to meet and that there's not, on the one hand, those who have done studies and the others. Well, I think it's our responsibility and a privilege to help those who have less than we do. Generally speaking, it's true in businesses, and the young generation has a lot of expectations to that effect. We have the chance of being able to do that, and at least at Forbis Mazars, we give time, financial means, but mainly time. We give our time. And I think this boils down to having collaborators that are comfortable, that feel good. They're not, in limitless productivity, or no. It participates to this logic of striking the right balance and spanning bridges. You wanted to react to that, Ignace? Interesting what's been set up for the youth, and generally speaking for the staff members in companies. We all have, I did a business schools. I work in offices sometimes in the field. We're not really aware, I must say, of what work means to the large majority of French people who are not managers, who are not working under the same conditions. I think it's important to be aware of that, and it's the responsibility of all business managers to be interested in that, because in all ecosystems you have the cleaning people, you have this sector of population that's not always present when you have the end of year parties, not concerned by the care movements and everything. So I think it's important to really look into their working conditions and all that, and this has to start from the top. That it's the senior managers that instill this idea of opening up, developing social policies in businesses, and take into consideration in their human resources policies and in their concerns those employees that do not necessarily correspond to the senior staff. No, to answer, do companies take into consideration these different levels, layers of populations? Because you're an observer, you see both sides of the medal. You establish a link between both. I think businesses are aware. What we do collectively is not enough. We have to admit. And there have been some very strong commitments. We took part in a number of operations, including in rural areas, following the Yellow Jacket event, trying to work on that. And to go back on what was said, it's true that businesses strongly contribute to support a certain number of nonprofit organizations, and nevertheless, we're very far from, and ironically, it's an understatement. It shows that the system is not performing well. It's crazy. Because if we put a lot of energy, sincere energy, and yet being so far from where we would want to be, I think we should ask ourselves some questions. The challenge ahead of us is a big challenge. And as a citizen and as a head of a company, I'm worried that on Monday everything start back again like before. So how collectively, I think businesses, and particularly those that can have an important impact, they should contribute, supporting all intermediate bodies, public authorities. So what do we do? Do we do a diagnosis? Do we do a pseudo diagnosis, put in place a certain number of actions, maybe, but in the end, not having an impact? So I think we all have to get together to see how we can have a stronger impact and head towards a more inclusive society. And that corresponds to the demand and expectation of our citizens. It's not the case today. So, but time is passing by. Stéphane, maybe you have something to say on that? What I think is very important is the culture of assessment, evaluation, which is not developed enough in France, notably for the assessment of public policies. I think of training. It's not a problem of means, like in education, for example. We discuss about means and everything and targeting, but in terms of vocational training, we spend 35 billion euros per year, as much as the budget of higher education and research, and everybody's complaining on the results, saying that it doesn't reach the people who need it. The programs are not top quality, so we did a reform of vocational training, but we still haven't evaluated or assessed. We feel like helping the businesses towards useful training. So we have to develop the culture of evaluation, of assessing the different programs. There are methods, there are approaches that are good, others that are less efficient. They need to be identified. So time is fine, but I think it's important to give the floor. So please use the microphone and please ask questions and introduce yourselves beforehand. Clearly. Thank you, madam. I'm Florence Lévy. I've worked 25 years in communications. I was the communication manager. Now work at National Education Board for not finding a job in communications, because at the age of 50 you're just terminated and it's hard to find a job. So your question. So of course I signed up on the MALT platform. I wrote some white papers for companies, but actually we create mercenaries as employees. We ask employees to be more, to match the values of businesses in terms of commitment. But what you see is that more and more by default, we sign up on platforms as self-employed people because we're not employable as of the age of 50 and sometimes before. So my question is how we manage to continue to develop the commitment. I did some brand platforms, internal communication to develop this commitment. But if we force employees to do freelancing, and in communications is very frequent because we don't want to hire these people. So what do you answer to this? Prefer freelancing to permanent employment? So don't we ask too much from the candidates? Don't we expect too much? So several things here in what you said. First element around what we call the unbalances between offer and demand, and that's where it's difficult to have sort of like a mean answer on this. Today you have the specialists in AI, and they have to make a choice between 20 demands every day, and sometimes it's much more difficult and complex. So if we go back on the seniority, I think that we need to support those people who have an expertise, and that it be valorized and valued at the level of their expertise and not at the level of the market and competition. So there's a public element in there, but there's another element that is, unfortunately, careers are no longer linear. And it's only point I wouldn't agree with you, is when you sign up on Malt or another platform, we continue to call on consultants to try to find a job, but we seldom say, I decided to do this and I want to do this to the end of my career. The example of Didier at Mazars is emblematic here, because we think there are some choices to do some missions here and there, to get a full-time job and then go back to something different, you know, flexibility. And to sort of like loop with everything that was said, we have a framework that enables to this difference has to be planned for in the legislation. Today it's totally abnormal that you, madam, have the same rights and duties than the deliver person who is victim of a status. So there's these two profiles correspond to the same duties and the same rights. So you're opening up a new field here to review the social model. I don't think we can have time for that. So, sir, my name is Yanis. I work in the Associated Media. Before addressing my question, I'd like to make a comment. I'd like to congratulate and thank the people here on stage, especially Inez. I think it's too bad in a society that wants to favor mixity and gender representation. There are only 2 women on this panel. So the position of the woman with the Rixain law, we see that there are more and more women who have responsible jobs, but less and less women today who are at managing levels in companies that they created. What do you do today with young women? How do you encourage young women to develop their projects, create their own businesses, and accompany them right up to the creation of their businesses? Thank you for your question, vast question. I think that just like when you want to encourage the emergence of talents in all social groups, representativity is very important. We need to open that door. And that's one thing that, first question I ask myself is why in this environment would some people not emerge? I think often it's a question of the culture, a question of process, but also social reality. Today, you tell us we need more women in management positions. The figure is there are more women in the poorer sections of the population, especially when they're single-parent household. They do difficult jobs with chopped-up work schedules and things. So we can't work with this aspect of managing women if you don't study their whole curriculum and their work experience. Where I think we will agree is that the business today has a role much more than just a mere economic role. I think it's the foundation of the French nation, is when people exchange between different social layers, that they put a word on these values and how they implement all this. Today, 1 year in the business world, I'll conclude here, we know that the most difficult jobs today, it's done by immigrants and women. When you know that, when it's obvious, it must be said. Because today there's the narrative is opposite to that. It's important to know who's working today, who does what is the reality of work today, and why at this top management level not everybody's represented, whether women, minorities, people from immigration, for example. Okay, we understood this well. Word, Monsieur Denis Graoui. On these 2 questions, well, I think your 2 questions bring out the reality. Clearly, I think we have to change our view on work. We've opposed those who have a job with those who don't. Women, you talked about seniority, all the retirement reform and everything, retirement plan reform. We know what we have to do for seniors and the equality between men and women. I'm sorry not to be a woman, but not only at top management level, but the part-time. Mrs. Born had said that she would commit herself to part-time jobs, but they're imposed at tax that they're taken by women. So we have a problem of articulation between private life and professional life. You talked about how you care for the children. So when you have children to take care of, it's difficult to find a job. And when you have a single parent family, 85% of women are concerned. So thanks to your question, we're touching reality. We see that the world of labor it's women who are responsible for their children, for the care of their children. I think socially, men should take more of their share on this. And these are other topics. So I think that would be a way to fight against inequalities when men take their share. They changed the law, to take care of newborn babies, a week more for the parents. I'm sorry, we don't have time to take another question. We can continue this debate after, but now I have to thank our guests who prepared this round table, and thank you very much. Round of applause, thank you. And we'll continue these debates throughout the day at the Rencontres d'Aix-en-Provence, whether online or in